Thank you very much, Beth, for that introduction. And obviously, hello to you all in the room today and also online. So as Beth said, I'm here to talk about the environment and sustainability strategy at Network Rail. And we're in a bit of a transitional period with it. So we're just moving from the old strategy into the new strategy in the new year. So I will do a little bit of kind of a merger of how the journey's kind of developed as we've gone through from one to the other. I'm hoping this clicker works. There we go. So in terms of our journey so far, so as Beth said, I've been in Network Rail 14 years. Probably 14 years or so ago, there were a few of us environment folk around, but I could probably count them on two hands. Now, I was just talking to Debs, who's also been here a similar amount of time, and we were saying how busy we are and how much sustainability has kind of grown in that time, which is obviously fabulous, but there's still an awful lot to do. In terms of our journey to kind of a strategy, we didn't have one up until 2020. And I think whether it kind of really stemmed from the Sustainable Development Goals in 2015 or not, I think that was probably a really core part to how the business started to move forwards and take this seriously. So the Sustainable Development Goals, as I say, they were from 2015. They are UN-wide 17 goals as part of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainability. That kind of, like I say, led on to us kind of thinking more seriously about what Network Rail needs to do for sustainability. And in 2020, it was really in the backdrop of COVID, it was the very end of 2020, we launched our first environmental sustainability strategy for Network Rail. Now, I will talk a little bit more about what was kind of in that strategy and, like I say, how it's moving forwards. But one thing it very much didn't include at the time was social value. So the business wasn't ready for it. We weren't mature enough. Very much it was about environmental sustainability. And so in 2021, so the following year, we launched a social value framework. And that framework kind of brought in the social value side. It wasn't the same kind of mandate of kind of things that we needed to do. It was much more of a framework for the business to understand what it needed from a social value perspective. And that itself aligned with the UK government's social value model and focused on 4 areas around economic prosperity, equal opportunity, well-being, and at the time, COVID-19 recovery, which obviously has moved forward since then. Then fast forward to last year, so very end of last year, or pretty much a year ago, I think, just over, the industry-wide blueprint was published. So this was done and led by RSSB, and this is the Sustainable Rail Blueprint. Now, the blueprint itself is, like I say, industry-wide, and it covers across 11 sustainable rail topics across kind of 3 key areas. So that is around natural environment, social sustainability, and emissions. And so following on from that, taking us to this year, it's an internal thing, but Network Rail itself has launched something called Simpler, Better, Greener. That's our news story for CP7, for Control Period 7. And for us sustainability folk that have been here a while, that really is quite a journey for us to have come on. If you had said to me 14 years or so ago that greener was up there in kind of lights as kind of what Network Rail really wanted to focus on, I'd have told you that you were having a bit of a laugh, to be honest. I would have thought that safety would have been up there, but the fact that green is there is absolutely brilliant for us and something that we're really trying to jump on. So that takes us to today, where we are moving forward to create the greener railway strategy. So as I mentioned, the strategy that exists at the moment, the one that you'd find if you went onto our website, is the environmental sustainability strategy. Now, it sounds like a small thing, but what we're changing that to is to be the environment and sustainability strategy. So it's not just about those environmental areas. It is, for the first time, incorporating social value into the strategy. So we had an ambition in our previous strategy, or our current strategy, which was to serve the nation with the cleanest, greenest mass transport. And of course, we still want to do that. It's absolutely part of what we want to be. We want to be as green as we possibly can. But ultimately, what we've done in this strategy refresh is really think about how sustainability can embed itself into the railway and into the rail industry, and how we can help the railway deliver its kind of core purpose. So our core purpose is to move people and goods to where they need to be. And what we want to do from a sustainability perspective is make sure that we're moving or connecting people and goods with where they need to be, not just today, not just tomorrow, but in the next 50 years, 100 years. We're about to hit our 200th birthday next year. It would be fabulous if we're still doing this in 200 years. Hopefully not me, but I'm sure it will still be around. And so that's where we're trying to really think about how we connect that sustainability strategy to the wider business. And so we've kind of come up with three core areas, which are to create a railway that's fit for the future, one that cares for the environment, and one that helps our communities thrive. Oh, that clicked a bit too quickly. Try again. There we go. So the little pictures you've got up here, that's our current strategy and our social value framework. So our current strategy has 4 areas. It's about having a low emissions railway, about having a railway that is reliable reliable railway service resilient to climate change. Always a bit of a tongue twister, that one. And about having minimal waste and the use of materials. And then the fourth area in our current strategy is about improved biodiversity of plants and wildlife. Talked a little about the social value framework, and what you can see hopefully from my little bit of animation that I managed to include is that that is now transitioning to have 8 priority areas for our strategy. So it's slightly broader than it was before. But all the things that were there are all still there and consistently staying there. So we've now moved to a railway that's fit for the future. That is very, very much thinking about what does the railway need to do from a sustainability perspective to make sure that we can continue to run the railway, maintain the railway, make sure that passengers' freight is getting from A to B. And so in there we've got the areas of supporting the delivery of net zero, contributing to a circular economy, and of course adapting to a changing climate. We've then thought about the biodiversity piece, and we've broadened it slightly. So we're thinking about a railway that really cares for the environment. So as well as biodiversity, which is now in the support nature's recovery area, we have also included a strategic area around protecting land, air and water. And so that goes into air quality, it goes into environmental incidents, and as I said, the support nature's recovery piece includes the biodiversity element in there, but is also thinking slightly broader. And then the last area, and this is the completely new area into the strategy, is the railway that helps communities thrive. So this is about thinking about the people that use the railway, the people that live near our railway, and anyone that in any way is part of our community. And so we've got some areas in here that touch beyond what would be typically Network Rail would see as the sustainability area, because we go into the kind of customer and communities area. And we're talking about creating an inclusive and accessible railway service. We also then want to support local economies, and we want to improve the well-being of our communities. And I will talk later at the end about the cultural piece that kind of surrounds all of these areas, and that's really important for us to do and to achieve in order to make sure that we deliver on all of these areas. So a little bit more detail on some of them. So each area has a kind of core objective that we're trying to achieve. And one change, I guess, in the strategy, so our current strategy goes from 2020 to 2050. It still absolutely does that, but the way we framed it at the moment, bearing in mind that we've got a bit of a changing industry at the moment, is that we've kind of got it in 2 sections. We've got what we're doing between now and 2030 and what we're doing in 2030 and beyond. So we're thinking about the current control period and kind of the world that we live in today, and then starting to think about, well, it doesn't matter whose badge is on the bonnet as such in kind of 5 years' time, but we still need to deliver on these sustainability objectives. So in terms of net zero, our objective in this area hasn't changed. We still absolutely want to contribute to achieving GB net zero carbon emissions by 2045 in Scotland, who are slightly ahead of England and Wales, who are aiming to achieve that by 2050. And so some of the things that kind of sit in this area are around our reduction of our scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions, talking about further rail electrification and future kind of innovations and technologies in terms of battery trains and other possible fuel sources for trains. We're talking about increasing rail freight volumes, so we're not just thinking about what is it that we need to do to decarbonise the actual railway itself, but how can the railway itself help contribute to that wider GB decarbonisation. We're talking about transitioning our fleet, so we've got about 9,500 vehicles that we need to transition towards zero emission vehicles, and achieving the carbon management in infrastructure standard PAS 2080 is another key target that we've got on our agenda at the moment. And of course, reducing infrastructure carbon. So thinking about the carbon that gets embodied in the infrastructure that we're building, maintaining, and working on. In terms of circularity, so I don't know how familiar you all are with the term circular economy, but essentially what we do at the moment is we live in a linear economy. We have something, we buy something, we use it, and we throw it away. It's a nice straight line. But what we want to do is make that circular. We don't want to be throwing stuff away. And that, of course, will help from a rail industry perspective of decarbonising, but also of kind of material security and making sure that we have the products, the infrastructure materials that we need to continue to run and maintain our railway as we move forwards. So in terms of circular economy, we are aiming to be a fully circular business. So we are looking at embedding circularity in design and procurement processes so that when people are buying things or when people are designing things, they're thinking of that end-of-life piece and what is it that we can do in order to kind of circle that round. And I know Debs will be talking in a little bit about some kind of areas that kind of cross over and link with this. We're also talking about cutting costs through designing out waste. You know, waste costs an awful lot of money to the business, and if we can kind of try and design it out so we're not creating it in the first place, or we can reuse it, then there'll be a significant financial saving there. We're talking about eliminating all waste, all but hazardous construction and demolition waste to landfill. And also in circular economy, we talk about water use, so reducing the water use. And that might be what we're using on site, or it might be what we're using in our offices. In terms of adapting to a changing climate, we are aiming to have a well-adapted railway system that is flexible, reliable, operates safely, and of course is responsive to a changing climate. Climate change is happening, climate change will continue to happen, and we need to make sure we are responsive to that. So all of our regions now have weather resilience and climate change adaptation plans, and we are aiming to obviously deliver on those plans and keep developing those plans as we move forward through the control periods. We are currently establishing regional long-term adaptation pathways, and then what we want to do once we've developed those is obviously deliver on them, so that we really are thinking about, in the long term, what do we need to do in each area in order to help the railway adapt to the changing climate. Each of the routes are developing key route strategies for operating in extreme weather, and ultimately our aim here is that we want to improve customer satisfaction during adverse and extreme weather. We've got to accept that it's going to happen, but we want to do what we can to make sure that passengers are aware of what's happening, that we can keep them moving as much as we can. And if sometimes it is that we have to stop the railway from working in that particular area, that we're back up and running as quickly as we possibly can, because we've thought all of that through and have plans in place. In terms of protecting land, air and water, we're aiming to reduce harm from both new and historic pollution to land, air and water to minimise our environmental impact. Now, I mentioned earlier this area covers air quality as well as some of our environmental incidents in those areas. So in terms of air quality, we're currently working on air quality improvement plans, and we're obviously then aiming to achieve those plans and work together across industry in order to make the air quality at our stations and across our infrastructure better. We're also obviously aiming for zero incidents that cause environmental harm, and we acknowledge that that's a really difficult task to get to a place we don't have any incidents. But what we want to do is be able to deal with them better, respond to them quicker, so that actually if something happens, we're able to minimise the amount of harm that happens to our environment. In terms of supporting nature's recovery, we're aiming to manage our land responsibly for the benefit of nature, safety and performance. And hopefully you can see from some of these slides that we're really trying to think about the safety and the performance aspect of what sustainability can bring to the railway. So this area is, of course, talking about achieving biodiversity net gain and working on our large infrastructure projects in order to achieve that. But actually it's now broader than that. We're looking at habitat management plans and having habitat management plans across the network so that as part of what we do, we think about the habitat we're creating, the habitat we're maintaining, and how we can kind of look after that for the long term and benefit biodiversity. But as well as benefiting biodiversity, as I've mentioned, we really need it to benefit safety. We do not want people saying that actually because of a tree we've had to put a temporary speed restriction on. We want to be able to manage our land so that we can run it as efficiently as possible. And then going into the social value areas, we're aiming to create an inclusive and accessible railway. So this is where we recognise there are still a lot of barriers that happen for people that are either from unrepresented or marginalised groups across our society, and we want to really make sure that everyone has the opportunity to connect with the rail network, whether that's using it to get from A to B, or whether that's using it as part of their community, so perhaps the stations as kind of community hubs, is really important to us to try and work out what we need to do next. In terms of supporting local economies, we are aiming to increase the amount of social value through investment in our railways. So we now have a rail social value tool which can monetise the benefits that we're creating from the work that we're doing from a social value perspective. And we're aiming to create £1 of social value for every £2 of supplier spend. And increasing our spend with our SMEs, we want to develop a more diverse supply chain, increase innovation, and get the best value for money that we possibly can. Lastly, in our priority areas, we want to improve the well-being of the communities that we serve. So this is things like increasing the use of our volunteer leave that we get internally in Network Rail, or also increasing the use of our land and property assets for community use, as we recognise we have an awful lot of land and assets that we can make better value of. We also want to be able to respond to the needs of our communities. We want to move away from where we are now, where we tend to mitigate any negative impacts, to actually thinking about the opportunities that we have while we're working in the community and really work on the creation of positive impacts. Now, I mentioned at the beginning that all of this won't happen unless we change the culture in the business. So wrapped around all of these areas is our theme around creating a culture of sustainability, and we call this a supporting ambition that we're trying to achieve in Network Rail. So what we want to do is for everyone to feel capable and confident to understand their contribution to delivering a simpler, better, greener railway. And we're aiming to do that in 3 ways. So we want to embed sustainable thinking across the organisation through looking at capability, so developing people's knowledge and skills in sustainability, so that everyone understands what role they play, and you don't have to be a sustainability specialist or an environmental manager to play a part. We absolutely want all of you to come on this journey with us. We want to look at our systems and processes. We don't want sustainability to be an extra thing that everyone feels like they need to do. It just needs to be part of the way you deliver the work. And so we want to make sure that we have integrated everything as much as we can. And in order to do all of those things, we need to collaborate. We need to collaborate with people across Network Rail, across different disciplines, but also across our supply chain. We really want to work together to come up with the innovative solutions to make sure we deliver on a sustainable railway and a greener railway as part of our Green Railway strategy. And that, hopefully, to time, is it from me. Thank you very much.